Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are speaking directly to you, the Catholic military women of Langley Air Force Base.
Right, whether you're active duty, a veteran, or a military spouse.
Exactly, because we know the really unique weight you carry every single day. You are navigating this intense military culture, the constant strain of deployments, and just that relentless balancing act.
Sustaining a professional mission while somehow keeping a family thriving at the same time.
Yeah, and we know that so much of what you do is invisible. I mean, it's the unrecognized work that holds absolutely everything together, often without a single word of acknowledgement.
Which is exactly why today's discussion is custom tailored for you.
Right. We are digging into a fascinating read-ahead packet provided by the Catholic Women of the Chapel and the Catholic Military Apostolate.
Some really incredible source material in there.
There really is. And our mission for this deep dive, we are going to explore an incredibly innovative ethics laboratory. It's known as a spiritual fitness staff ride.
Which is specifically designed to ignite the warfighter ethos.
Right, and we're going to anchor this whole exploration in the true, honestly staggering story of a woman who held the line in the darkest of times.
Extracting some really powerful theological and ethical lessons for your daily life.
Okay, let's unpack this. I hear the term staff ride, and I immediately picture, like, a stuffy museum tour or some dry history lecture. What exactly are we talking about here?
Yeah, that is a really common misconception. But a staff ride is definitely not a guided tour. Think of it more as a decision-making laboratory that is anchored to real ground.
So not just standing around looking at plaques.
Exactly. To really grasp it, we have to look at where the concept comes from. It traces its roots back to Karl von Clausewitz.
Oh, the military strategist.
Right. Arguably the most influential military thinker in Western history. And he firmly believed that you cannot learn strategy in a sterile classroom.
Because the classroom doesn't shoot back.
Precisely. Clausewitz argued that examining real choices made under intense, terrifying pressure is the only way to build the judgment necessary for what he called the friction of war.
The friction of war. I like that phrase.
Yeah, it's that chaotic, grinding reality that turns perfectly clean theoretical plans into life-and-death improvisation.
So how did that become an actual training method?
Well, later on, a Prussian strategist named Helmuth von Moltke the Elder turned this philosophy into a concrete method. He said you study the campaign, you walk the actual ground where it happened, and you reckon with the human cost that a flat map can never show you.
Putting yourself right in the shoes of the commander.
Right, at the exact moment everything went sideways. The U.S. Army actually adopted this method way back in 1906, and it has remained a cornerstone of professional military education ever since.
So you force yourself to feel the crushing weight of those historical decisions.
Exactly.
Which brings us to how you, the Catholic women at Langley Air Force Base, have pushed this tradition into entirely new territory. Because a conventional staff ride typically asks how a commander made a tactical decision.
Right, the mechanics of it.
Right. But this spiritual fitness staff ride asks why they made it and what kind of person they were when that defining moment arrived.
It moves past tactics and goes straight to character.
Which hits on something really crucial for anyone in uniform.
It does. It hits on the integrating pillar of comprehensive airman fitness.
Right, because we usually hear about the 4 pillars: physical, mental, social, and spiritual.
But spiritual fitness isn't just a separate box to check. It integrates everything else. Think of it like this. Physical toughness tells you how long you can endure a hardship before your body gives out. Mental resilience tells you how to keep functioning through the stress.
Okay, so where does spiritual fitness come in?
Spiritual fitness tells you why you are enduring it at all, and whether the action is actually worth doing in the first place.
It's the compass.
It is the compass. It is the developed capacity to act on what is right, especially when doing the right thing costs you something heavy.
And the source packet actually references the tradition of virtue ethics here, right? Pulling from thinkers like Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas.
Yes. They point out that virtue isn't just an emotion. You don't just wait around to feel virtuous. It's a muscle.
Like going to the gym.
Exactly. You don't just wake up one morning with a six-pack, and you don't wake up with the capacity to make grueling ethical choices under fire. You have to build it in the reps. It's an operational capacity built through deliberate habits.
And to really test that capacity, this specific staff ride takes us to some incredible historical ground. I was reading through the materials, and I was honestly blown away by the history of lighthouses.
It's epic history.
It really is. I never really thought about the tech behind them. I just pictured, a big bonfire on a cliff. But the materials mention something called the glass revolution.
Right. For thousands of years, the coastline was basically a graveyard for ships. You did have those desperate bonfires. And around 280 BC, there was the Pharos of Alexandria in Egypt.
A massive tower.
Yeah, a 350-foot tower using polished bronze mirrors to throw light out to sea. But the real game changer, the glass revolution you mentioned, hit in 1822.
Okay, who is behind that?
A French engineer named Augustin Fresnel.
For those of us who aren't engineers, how did that actually change things? Was it just a bigger magnifying glass?
Far more advanced than that. Fresnel created a lens that essentially looked like a giant glass beehive, made of hundreds of interlocking glass prisms.
Wow.
Because before this, an oil lamp would lose most of its light, just scattering it in all directions.
Yeah.
The Fresnel lens captured every single stray glimmer of light from a simple flame and compressed it into a brilliant, concentrated beam.
A beam that was visible for 20 miles.
Yes, a massive leap in technical mastery.
And that brings us precisely to the ground you study on this staff ride, Old Point Comfort, specifically Fort Monroe, Virginia. The geography here is intense.
It really is. This site has been the strategic maritime gateway to the American interior since 1607.
Because whoever held Old Point Comfort controlled access to Virginia's rivers.
Exactly, and by extension, a massive chunk of the continent. Because of its importance, a 54-foot sandstone lighthouse was built right there on the edge of the Republic in 1802.
But the stakes didn't truly skyrocket until the Civil War broke out in 1861.
Right. Fort Monroe became a massive Union stronghold, but it was completely surrounded by seceding Confederate territory.
Literally an island in a hostile sea.
Yes, and crucially, it became known as Freedom's Fortress.
Which is a staggering moment in history.
It is. It happened after Union General Benjamin Butler made a pivotal, incredibly risky ethical decision. 3 escaped enslaved men. Frank Baker, Shepard Mallory, and James Townsend sought sanctuary at the fort.
And Butler refused to return them.
Exactly. He exploited a legal loophole, declaring the men contraband of war.
Let's just pause and think about the weight of that. The lighthouse at Old Point Comfort wasn't just guiding supply ships to keep the fort alive. It literally became the fixed point in the darkness, guiding human beings out of slavery and into freedom.
The stakes could not possibly be higher.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the human anchor of our story, Amelia Dewees.
Right. In 1857, the U.S. Lighthouse Establishment handed Amelia a federal commission.
A $550 annual salary.
And the keys to this massive strategic choke point.
A woman in 1857 being handed the keys to the most important maritime choke point on the Eastern Seaboard. That alone is incredible.
It is. She was a commissioned professional in a field that absolutely did not expect a woman to be there.
And she didn't just inherit a quiet, sleepy post. She inherited the premier technology of the era. She was put in charge of a fourth-order French Fresnel lens, that giant glass beehive we talked about, and a massive 40-inch bronze fog bell.
What's fascinating here is the sheer ethical weight of what she actually had to do every single day to keep that technology running.
Which brings us to the first major spiritual insight we can draw from her life, the invisible task.
Because her daily grind was unimaginably grueling.
When I read the details, my jaw dropped.
Yeah.
We were talking about Amelia hauling 5-gallon containers of heavy lard oil up 54 feet of narrow, winding spiral stairs, multiple times a day.
And the lantern room at the top was essentially a glass greenhouse. It trapped the sun and felt like a sweltering furnace.
Where she had to trim the lamp wicks with surgical precision so they wouldn't smoke up the glass.
But the most critical part of all of this physical labor, her most important work, happened at 3 a.m. when absolutely no one was watching her.
Just total isolation.
Complete isolation.
Yeah.
The core lesson here is that the integrity of the mission was secured in the dark.
Because the light only made the news if she failed and it went out.
Exactly. No captain on any of the ships she saved ever knew her name. They never wrote Amelia Dewees in their logbooks. But God saw the lamp burning, and for Amelia, that witness was enough.
The discipline wasn't performative, it was foundational.
And that speaks so directly to the listener.
It really does. If you're listening to this on your commute to Langley or while you're managing the chaos at home, think about how much this mirrors the invisible labor military women carry every single day.
At work and at home.
Right. Whether you are at work doing the boring discipline of maintaining military SOPs, checking the logs, doing the inventory so a unit is actually ready for a surge, or you're at home grinding through the mundane precision of dishes, bills, laundry, and just showing up for your kids when you are bone tired.
It's all invisible.
No one is pinning a medal on your chest for doing the laundry at midnight.
The read-ahead packet actually includes a brilliant fictional story to illustrate exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It introduces a character named Captain Val Velez.
Oh, right, the one in the van.
Yes. She's sitting in a sweltering, deployable ground station van somewhere in the Pacific.
Okay, wait, a deployable ground station van. Can we explain that? Because
Yeah.
it sounds like a lot of acronyms.
Fair point. Essentially, it's a mobile command center packed to the ceiling with highly sensitive computer servers and radar equipment. It's the nervous system for tracking threats.
Got it.
In the story, Captain Velez's screens are filled with static because a Chinese Type 055 destroyer is actively jamming their radar frequencies.
A massive high-tech warship.
Right. And the equipment in the van is overheating and failing. Her young lieutenant is panicking, ready to blame the dying tech and just pass the buck to higher command.
But then a seasoned chief steps in.
Exactly. The chief points out the real issue. The cooling vents on those sensitive servers are completely choked with a thick crust of tropical salt and dust. The machines are literally suffocating.
So what does Captain Velez do?
Here is the kicker. She doesn't execute some glorious movie-style cyber hack to defeat the destroyer. She crawls into a tiny, suffocatingly hot space behind the server racks with a handheld vacuum and a brush.
Oh, wow.
And she spends 90 minutes doing the sweaty, invisible, utterly unglamorous work of scrubbing out the vents.
Wait, so instead of some high-tech cyber defense, the captain literally just vacuumed the dust out of the vents? That's almost funny, but it completely changes how I view readiness.
It really does.
Got it.
Because once the system cools down, the processing lag vanishes and the radar tracks clear up to get their signal back.
So readiness is not built in the adrenaline of contact with the enemy.
No, it is built in the mundane, boring persistence of the watch when no one is watching and no one is giving out medals.
You mentioned the salt and the dust choking the servers, and that actually sticks with me because it naturally brings us to the second core insight, interior clarity.
Yes, this is huge.
Because for Amelia Dewees, the controlling image of her daily life was the salt film on her glass lens.
The air off the Chesapeake Bay was constantly coating those beautiful Parisian glass prisms with a white film of salt and soot from the oil lamp.
So what does she have to do?
Every single morning, Amelia had to meticulously wipe every inch of that glass with a specialized linen cloth and high-proof alcohol.
Wiping glass sounds easy enough, but the packet frames it as a matter of life and death. Why was that so critical?
Because the stakes for that specific task were absolute. A single smudge or a thin layer of soot scatters the beam. It diffuses the light so it can't pierce the fog.
Oh, I see.
In Amelia's world, she couldn't control the weather, she couldn't control the civil war raging outside her door, but she could control the clarity of the glass.
That is such a profound metaphor.
The deep insight here is that bitterness, exhaustion, and resentment act exactly like that salt spray in your own life. They creep in slowly, day by day, layer by layer, and they scatter your signal before you even realize your vision is clouded.
You cannot reflect the light if your interior lens is clouded with resentment.
Exactly.
You simply cannot give what you do not have, and you cannot reflect what you have allowed to become obscured. If you let the soot build up, your signal to your unit or to your family is going to fail.
That's why establishing boundaries and self-awareness is so critical. The packet outlines the ethical limits perfectly. On the professional front, the danger is letting cynicism build up until you completely lose your professional judgment.
You lose your pride in the uniform.
Right. You start doing the bare minimum because your perspective is clouded by the salt of daily frustrations.
And at home, it's even more dangerous.
Absolutely. At home, the danger is what psychologists call emotional spillover.
I think we've all been guilty of that.
Oh, for sure. This is when you walk through your front door and dump all your work brain stress, your anger at your commander, and your sheer exhaustion onto your spouse and kids.
You react to your own internal soot rather than seeing your family clearly for who they are.
Because you failed to wipe your internal lens clear before engaging with the people who matter most.
It takes an incredible amount of self-awareness to catch that buildup. It is so easy to let that resentment accumulate until we start snapping at the people we actually want to protect.
It is the hardest invisible work there is.
Which brings us to the third and perhaps most intense spiritual anchor of this deep dive. What feeds the flame?
Yes.
And understand this, we have to look at Amelia's other massive responsibility, that 40-inch bronze fog bell.
Right. Because when a 3-day Chesapeake fog rolled in, the light from the lamp just wasn't enough. Ships couldn't see it, so they relied on sound.
But this wasn't a bell you just ring with a rope, right?
No, it ran on heavy lead clockwork weights, similar to a grandfather clock, but on a massive industrial scale. To keep it ringing, Amelia had to manually wind those lead weights back to the top using a heavy iron hand crank
How often?
every few hours, all night long, with zero sleep for days at a time.
Hand cranking heavy lead weights while sleep deprived for 3 days. I complain when my coffee maker takes too long in the morning.
It's physically absurd.
I can't even fathom the upper body strength, let alone the mental stamina required for that.
But the takeaway here is vital. A bell like that cannot just be filled once and left alone. It demands that you return over and over again with something of yourself. Or it goes entirely silent.
So she couldn't just run on empty.
Exactly. Amelia had to know exactly what fuel she was burning on internally to sustain that kind of agonizing effort. She couldn't just run on adrenaline or panic. She needed a deep, internal well of purpose.
This is the crucial message for everyone listening. Good women have run themselves to nothing on duty alone, and they've called it virtue.
They think, if I just suffer enough,
Right, if I just sacrifice enough sleep, I'm being a good officer, a good spouse, a good mother. But it is not virtue. It is slow extinction.
which is why I want to pose this directly to the listeners. What is feeding your internal flame?
Because you cannot just grind yourself into dust and think that's what you're supposed to do.
In the military and in your family, you are the logistics officer of your own spirit. If you do not actively manage your own internal oil, your reserves of patience, your faith, your resilience, your sense of purpose, you will inevitably burn out.
And when you burn out, you don't just hurt yourself.
No, you leave behind a cemetery of broken trust with your team and your loved ones. So the question is, are you running on empty right now, just hoping no one notices? Or are you deliberately and actively refueling your sense of purpose?
Okay, so what does this all mean? When we pull all of these threads together, the massive value of the spiritual fitness staff ride becomes incredibly clear.
It really does.
It completely collapses the distance between a lonely lighthouse in 1857 and your life at Langley today. It proves that ethical readiness is fundamentally military readiness.
Absolutely.
The invisible tasks you do every day at 3:01 a.m. when no one is looking are what actually build your foundation. Wiping away your resentment and clearing your internal lens is what focuses your impact on the people around you.
And actively taking responsibility for feeding your own flame is what keeps you and your family alive and thriving through the chaos of military life. I want to leave you with a final lingering thought based on the history we discussed today. Think back to the evolution of those lighthouses we talked about earlier.
Right, the glass revolution and all that.
Specifically, an engineer named John Smeaton and his Eddystone light from 1759. He revolutionized lighthouse engineering, but he didn't do it by building a rigid, unyielding brick wall.
What did he do?
He modeled the interlocking stone blocks of the lighthouse after the shape of an oak tree.
An oak tree. How does that work for a stone tower?
He designed it to be exceptionally wide at the base to absorb the violent shock of the waves, and then tapering up so the structure could actually flex and stand through the storm.
Rather than just rigidly fighting the ocean.
Because the ocean will always win against something rigid. It has to give a little. So as you navigate the intense, compounding pressures of military and family life, ask yourself, are you trying to stand rigidly perfect, pretending you don't feel the weight of the waves and risking a catastrophic fracture?
Or are you doing something else?
Exactly. Are you deliberately designing your daily habits and your spiritual fitness like that oak tree, deeply rooted, flexible, and built specifically to absorb the inevitable shocks of your environment?
That is such a powerful, vivid image to carry with you this week. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep your lens clear, keep doing the invisible work, and above all, make sure you keep your flame burning. We'll catch you next time.